G20 leaders paid their respects to Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi as their summit came to close on Sunday. A day after, the group added a new member and reached agreement on a range of issues but softened language on Russia's war in Ukraine. The group of 20 rich and developing nations welcomed the African Union as a member, part of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's drive to uplift the global south. And host India was able to get the disparate group to sign off on a final statement despite pointed disagreements among powerful members, mostly centered on the European conflict. India also unveiled an ambitious plan with the United States, the European Union, and others to build a rail and shipping corridor linking it with the Middle East and Europe in a bid to strengthen economic growth and political cooperation. With those major agenda items taken care of, the leaders shook hands Sunday and posed for photos with Modi at the Rajghat Memorial Site in New Delhi. Each received a shawl made of khaki, a hand-spun fabric that was promoted by Gandhi during India's independence movement against the British. Some leaders, including British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and last year's G20 host, President Joko Widodo of Indonesia, walked to the memorial barefoot in a customary show of respect. US President Joe Biden and others wore slippers as they walked over wet ground spotted with puddles from heavy rain. The leaders stood before wreaths placed around the memorial, which features an eternal flame and was wrapped with orange and yellow marigold garlands. The one reserved for Modi identified him as Prime Minister of Bharat, an ancient Sanskrit name championed by his Hindu nationalist supporters that shot to prominence as the summit approached. Earlier in the day, Sunak and his wife Akshata Murthy separately took time to visit and offer prayers at the Akshardham temple, one of Delhi's most prominent Hindu houses of worship. Brazilian President Lula da Silva took over the G20 rotating presidency at the summit's end. He hopes to rebuild Brazil's standing after a period of international isolation under far-right former leader Jair Bolsonaro. Brazil, home to the majority of American rainforest, will likely use its presidency to advocate for increased funds for environmental preservation, according to experts. Lula has sought to move beyond the disputes over Ukraine, telling Indian news site First Post that the G20 wasn't the appropriate forum to discuss the war. Brazil has proposed mediating in the conflict, but those efforts have largely been rebuffed, and its refusal to arm Ukraine has sparked criticism from Western countries. Latin America's biggest democracy is also scheduled to assume the presidency of the BRICS group, composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and host the UN's climate conference in 2025. In the months leading up to the Leader Summit in New Delhi, India had been unable to find agreement on the wording about Ukraine, with Russia and China objecting even to the language that they had agreed to at the 2022 G20 Summit in Bali. This year's final statement, released a day before the formal close of the summit, highlighted the human suffering and negative added impacts of the war in Ukraine but did not mention Russia's invasion directly. Western leaders who have pushed for stronger rebuke of Russia's actions in the past G20 meetings still called the consensus a success and praised India's nimble balancing act. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said at a news conference that thanks to the Global South defending its legitimate interests, it was possible to prevent the success of the West's attempt to again Ukrainize the entire agenda to the detriment of discussing the urgent problems of developing nations. Lavrov added that the Ukrainian crisis is mentioned in the final G20 declaration, but exclusively in the context of the need to resolve all conflicts that exist in the world. India had made directing more attention to addressing the needs of a developing world a focus of the summit, and organizers worked hard to keep it from being dominated by war. Also at the summit, India launched a global biofuel alliance with 19 countries including the US and Brazil. The fuels made from agriculture produce or organic waste have gained popularity in recent decades as a sustainable alternative to fossil fuels. The G20 includes Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the United Kingdom, the US, and the EU. Spain holds a permanent guest seat. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping opted not to come this year, ensuring no tough face-to-face conversations with their American and European counterparts. On the sidelines of the G20 summit, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meets India Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Canada and India talked on climate change, Khalistan and foreign interference. PM Narendra Modi conveys India's strong concerns on anti-India activities in Canada to Prime Minister Trudeau in the meeting. PM Trudeau on Khalistan said that he will defend freedom of expression, prevent violence and hatred. This is what he is saying.
We recognize that India is an extraordinarily important economy in the world and an important partner to Canada on everything from fighting climate change to creating growth and prosperity for citizens. There's always a lot of work to do, and we will continue to do it. We talked about how important it was for this G20 to be the success that it was, having solid conversations and interactions that involved countries, the major countries from around the world, creating moments both for formal interactions and the productive informal conversations that were a huge part of this summit to advance important issues. We also talked about the range of issues that matter, whether it's climate change or the rule of law or issues facing Canadians and Indians.
Apart from meeting Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Trudeau also met with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, where they discussed growing economies, fighting climate change and supporting Ukraine. On the sidelines of G20 summit, Prime Minister Trudeau also met with World Bank's President Ajay Banga. PM Modi also met UK PM Rishi Sunak. On sidelines of G20 summit, both discussed ways to deepen trade linkages and boost investment.